Kelin.
Joe.
All right, so today is post-election day.
Yes.
And so let's kind of go through what everybody experienced. And, as we said before going into this, there's 50% of the population is going to be happy and 50% of the population is going to be sad. So who do you want to speak to first, the happies or the sads?
Well, I guess I feel like the shorter conversation would be to go towards the happy.
Okay.
Yeah, I've definitely seen when I look on my social media pages, yes, 50% are celebrating, are happy, are relieved. The other 50% total opposite. But
all right, so what wisdoms do you want to throw out at the happy? Now,
at the happy?
Yeah, at the happy.
Wisdoms. I don't know about wisdoms. My take on it was I feel like when it comes to the day after election day or maybe even the week after, it's very sensitive. It's a very sensitive subject right now. And I think that anybody that is looking to still try to change the mind of someone, you're not gonna. Why are you still trying? Why are you even gonna try a couple of days when emotions are so heightened? Personally, I have decided to just not post a thing for a couple of days because everybody is just going to be heightened, ready for a fight, and I'm just not doing it. That's my only words of wisdom.
All right, so
maybe wait.
In this hypothetical, so let's just say Bob. We're going to use Bob.
Bob.
And Bob going into it was, it's a competition and you're throwing barbs at each other. And Bob was a total dick douchebag, right?
Okay.
And now that he lost and you won, right? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be the gentleman in it and respect the fact that you were the winner and he was the loser? Are you going to be a douchebag dick right back to Bob because now it's deserved? Because Bob would be a dick douchebag to you had it been reversed.
Yeah.
So do you preach civility now and let's get back to normal and let's do unity and let's break bread together? Or is it like, dude, I won and it's throat punch time?
I mean, personally, I feel like I don't need to do it's throw punch time. If somebody were that big of a jerk and then my side won, I would kind of just sort of sit there and be like, you know what I'm thinking. I know you know what I'm thinking. Let's just stew on it, shall we? Let's just bask in this moment for a little bit before I say anything. I part of me would really want to be the bigger person and celebrate quietly. Don't rub it in anyone's faces. Be a good winner. But a lot of that too is just you don't really need to. You don't really need to say anything. They already know what you're thinking.
But when the game is played like this, when it's a tribal team sport, that's what happens on the other side of winning or losing when you're playing a tribal team sport.
Yeah.
You get the good with the bad. So if you're going to play that game on the front side of it, you have to expect on the back side to be able to receive what you would get if your team doesn't win at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ballsy leading up to it,
that's
then
right. You got to be able to take it on the other side. So still speaking to those that had won, making the best of what is here now. What do you think the biggest win out of having a Trump presidency would be delivered to? Not just even the winners, but to everybody in general. What do you think we got by this?
What did we get by it? God, these deep questions I need to think about. The biggest win. I feel like this whole election was not just about the two candidates themselves. I feel like this whole election was very much about two types of people, two groups of people that were almost purposefully or maybe not purposely fully pitted together. Two people that see things very differently that were sort of butting heads. And I feel like the winners of this, or the ones that feel maybe vindicated by this, have that. They feel like, listen, you're going to accuse me of A, B, and C. You're going to call me this, this, and that. And I'm done. I think that this really brings to light a lot of things that people have been sort of tired of if that makes sense. It brings to light a lot of things that it doesn't matter so much even what you want to call someone, but someone can still make something happen. I'm trying to be vague. I'm trying to be vague. And I hope my point is getting across still, but I think I think there's a lot of people that maybe feel vindicated from the win and feel like, we're not just going to sit back and take crap that we don't deserve just because you think we deserve it. If that
All right,
makes sense.
now the people who now get delivered into government, you have Trump, you have Ben Carson, you have Elon Musk, you have RFK Jr., you have now Ron Paul. Like, this blew me away that Ron Paul it's like the dream team. When the basketball players go to the Olympics and like now the Olympics are going to be outmatched by serving the absolute best. I think that dream team does everything I would want them to do.
Well, a lot of people are sort of liking them to the Avengers.
Yes, exactly.
And I really like that term. Is like when you see, I've even seen caricatures of like RFK and Tulsi and Elon, and they're like, their heads are on all the different Avengers and everything. So I really like that metaphor. But I'm super. I've always said this. Well, I've said it for months. I'm super stoked about RFK. I'm really hoping this whole thing can now really bring to light a lot of the health concerns America's facing. I really have grown to like Tulsi Gabbard. I'll be honest. I didn't know much about her before.
She's awesome. Like, she's one of my favorites.
I mean, I'd seen her a little bit, obviously. She did the one debate when she wanted to be the presidential candidate, but didn't know a lot about her until she started supporting Trump, and I started seeing her in more interviews, and I'm just like, wow, I really like her. So those two, again, Elon Musk. Yes, I knew who Elon Musk was. I knew a little bit about what he's done, but I didn't know a whole lot about him. I feel like this whole election really kind of sent me down a rabbit hole of learning about all different people on both sides. And I'm super intrigued as to what all these people, aside from Trump, what the people he is surrounding himself with are going to do. I think he's got an amazing team of Avengers.
So here's the thing, though. The machine is not going to go down without a fight. You just assembled these people who are going to dismantle something that people revere as almost sacred in government.
Yeah.
So today there was an emergency meeting amongst pharmaceutical companies. They had an emergency phone call meeting knowing that RFK is going to come in here. He's going to change the gravy train of medical spending that the government is involved in. Mm-hmm. And he threatens our livelihood because of what he's about to do in government. So you can just see him walking in there with his Iron Man suit, and then the machine being like, dude, you thought you were coming in here and just going to have your way? We've got more power than you, and we're going to destroy you, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be almost a concerted effort. If you're going to take chunks out of the machine, you got to hit them on multiple fronts. And being that they're so, like, go ahead and point at the part of the machine that's going to come after him. You don't freaking know. Like, it's not elected. It doesn't have form. It's a bunch of people that have controls and power behind the scenes. And if they want to take a stab at you, they're gonna. And you're not going to know where it's coming from or who did it. And so, like, it has to be that full frontal attack on it. So you have people like, Ron Paul, who basically says the federal government has overstepped in every department possible. So everything from law enforcement, regulations, the oversight that we have in our personal lives. And there are people and regulators that are like, oh shit, like, I'm 5 years away from my retirement. My whole job's being threatened because of this dude who's going to come in here and he doesn't want me to look at X, Y, Z. I probably work 5 minutes a day, but I get a nice big paycheck at the end of the day. If I'm unemployed because of Ron Paul, what can we do to that dude right now between now and when he gets some say within the next administration?
Yeah.
And then but you take all those superheroes and each one of them. So Elon Musk says, okay, we're going to cut government. We'll say 80%. We're going to just basically, and his strategy is almost a little better and more palatable because here's what he's going to do. He's going to give the golden parachute to all the government workers and saying years worth of salary to just go away, right? So it's going to cost us less if we cut your whole department out and we still have to pay you for a couple years for you just to go away, because in the end, that department goes away forever. So if he can cut $2 trillion off by just dismantling government without threatening the employees who are going to gang up on him and make sure that he's not successful at it, and then RFK, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, like those are big contingents on lots of wielding of power. And they're going to be like, okay, well, if that starts getting dismantling and our sales reps and our influences on legislation are threatened, I'm going to destroy the shit out of that guy. So it could be, and I'll start at the bottom. So I'm going to threaten you so that you change your ways and, say, you're not as big as you think you are. I'm going to sabotage you so that if you try to do it, I'm going to embarrass you and you're going to go away. I'm going to ruin you by I got a story that I'm going to throw out there that's trying to undermine your credibility, or I'm just going to have you murdered. Like all four of those things are possible. And do you think that someone in a bureaucracy would be opposed to having you killed if it means them or you? I absolutely think that is a method that is used amongst those people in the machine.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, you've already seen this beginning where when they try to discredit, they try to make someone look like, oh, this is the crazy person. Why would you listen to him? This isn't a medical professional. This isn't whatever. They try to discredit everything. And then of course there's this whole idea of, turning your back or being a traitor. Somebody told me one time, they're like, well, Trump got into office the first time and he just betrayed everyone and fired everyone. And it's like, why do you automatically assume he's just betraying and firing good people instead of he got in there, he saw corruption, he saw a lot of bullshit and was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. This isn't effective. This isn't working. So you're going to have the two sides. And that's what they're going to do. I think, first off, they're going to use those two to fight back. But are they above
murdering offing someone? You have to keep the Avengers safe on this because they're in territory that is very threatening and threatened by that whole group. So let's talk about the Trump and the felonies, right? Because one of the most effective things in government is to sort of like take someone's legs out on their credibility. And if you can tag someone with being a racist, being a homophobic, having felonies, being a traitor, all of that language is effective amongst the group of people that want to hate you anyway. So if you can hang that around their neck, that's completely effective. The problem is that when you overuse it, it becomes least effective. So when everybody's a racist, then people don't respond to that anymore, and you ruin something that otherwise should get people upset about it. So when with the felonies, I respect law enforcement really high, and I think that people that break the law, justice should be served. And I think that is the normal sort of outlook on it. Is especially people in power should be held to a higher regard as far as following the law. But my feeling is, you have the entire legislature made up of lawyers, and they pretty much make up more laws than anybody could actually adhere to. So if I had an AI, hover bot follow you around, right?
Yeah.
And all it's going to do is observe you, and it's going to pay attention to the laws that you break. And all it's going to do is at the end of the day, it's going to refer back to the Justice Department that you broke so many laws, and then you're going to be held accountable. Well, just because I don't go to jail every day for breaking laws, do you think on a daily basis you break some kind of law that could have you in front of a judge every day?
Every day?
Every day.
Probably. I mean, technically, speeding, if you're going a few miles over the speed limit, is that not technically breaking the law?
Right. And you might have a law from 1912 that's still on the books that you did something and you have no idea that it was in law. So this whole, how many rules, laws, and regulations that we break on a daily basis. So what that does is that gives ammunition to people that are in law enforcement that all they have to do is pick you and they will find the law that you broke. Okay, so if you have so many laws that you can't avoid breaking some of them at any given time, and you have a Justice Department that can target specific people and then just go after them. So here would be my challenge. So let's just say you picked Trump and you dug through his history and his past and picked out the things that he did wrong. But then you did the exact same thing to everybody that's in his circle, in his strata, in the executive branch, and whatever, how many of them would survive the same kind of scrutiny that you would get? My guess is all of them would have 34 felonies going into it, right?
Yeah.
And so really, when you start exercising the ability to be able to pick somebody out, you almost have to uniformly and say, okay, well, we held the same standard to 20 people, and Trump was the only one that had felonies. Now it freaking means something.
Yeah.
But if you're selective about it and you hand them out like they're candy, you devalue our reaction to them. So to be surprised where people voted Trump as president with 34 felonies hanging around his neck, shouldn't be surprised with that in mind.
Yeah. And the thing that gets me too, and I've talked about this multiple times, is I just can't stand the hypocrisy of people. When I hear things like, I can't understand why anybody would vote for him based off of what he has said about women. And I hear that judgment come from a person that I know for a fact has said or done terrible things involving women. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Really? Because he said something, not okay. You did something, that's fine. And I get it. I get the whole, but he's running for president. He's the leader of a country. He should be held to a certain standard. Whatever. But yeah, same thing. Well then, all right, if we're going to make that a big deal, let's make it a big deal, regardless of who does it.
Uniformly apply it to everyone. And then when you find that nobody's electable, right, you're either going to insist that we up our principle standards and, only elect Jesus and know that since everybody else has been discredited because of that same hypocrisy. But you'll see even in the team sports that you can have two candidates and both do the exact same thing. And are you going to levy the same charge at both of them and hold them both as a standard? Or are you going to make a pass at your guy because he's on your team and really hold it to the highest standards on the other? It's just a strategy. That's why it doesn't carry a lot of weight with regular people, because we see that you're doing that. You see that it's not really important to you. I'm always hopeful that when we dig through that, we're going to discover a principle and everybody's going to come to some kind of enlightenment where yeah, you know what? We do need to have good people who won't do those things. But so long that the hypocrisy's there, you can't take it serious.
Oh gosh. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, well, he's just going to overlook everyone else's wrongdoing because he does wrong things. Again, what are you doing? Because you honestly think the other side has no wrongdoings and that you have no wrongdoings? And speaking of overlook, how about the fact that everything we report on is completely one-sided? We completely 100% overlook an entire side. So it's I'm sorry, that's not what I base my voting opinions on. There's just too many loopholes in it. You're never going to find the perfect personality, the perfect, most pristine record. And to sit there and be like, well, nothing else matters because of this thing, to me, is just such bull crap. It's such bull crap. It's well, to me, it shows that you have no other argument for the person you are supporting, that is your only fallback.
Now, do you feel good so you go to the dollar store and you buy a variety pack, and inside the variety pack, there's something you really don't want, but there's 5 things that you do want. Do you buy the variety pack to get the stuff that you want, even if you have to buy the one that you really didn't?
Sometimes, yeah.
So would you be willing to compromise on something you didn't solely agree with to get something good that it's not going to be perfect, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because the perfect doesn't exist. I would love for perfect to exist. I would love for 100% amazing, perfect choice. But when it doesn't exist, then yes, you have to pick and choose what you are willing to live with to get
compromise.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's just say you're part of Trump's team now. And then you can take out any department that you want, any government, bureaucracy, any 3-letter organization. What is the first one that you're gunning for?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I can't even answer that intelligently.
Which one do you hate the most? Which one makes you the maddest?
I would really have to do more research on this.
I'll name some, and you tell me which one you hate.
Okay.
All right. Do you like the IRS? All right.
I don't know if anyone likes the IRS, but
we're taking a sort of putting together a list of ones, and we're going to put them. I admire and love this organization, and this one needs to go away, right?
Okay.
And so, what is the responsibilities of the IRS?
I mean, I want to make sure you're paying your taxes, and that's all I got.
Okay, so their job is to threaten you with imprisonment to take your money, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Making
in like
sure you're
mafia
paying.
terms, there would be a guy that's responsible for shaking people down for their money. So
Busting your kneecaps.
That's the IRS. So we got the
Yeah.
IRS first.
Yeah.
Department of Education.
I mean, again, I don't know much about it. It sounds like it's an important thing if done correctly.
Okay. This is one of those Department of Kicking Puppies thing. Like you name it a certain way, and if you disagree with Department of Education, then that means you must not like education. Right?
Yeah.
But a federalized department that is responsible for X. So if it was responsible for making sure that every kid had a basic understanding of mathematics and whatnot, that would be a noble cause. Federalize that, right? So do we need something at the federal level for education?
I feel like we do.
Okay, give me one thing.
Something.
Give me one thing the federal government has to do that state governments couldn't do.
That state governments couldn't do.
Yeah.
That's all right. Worded that way.
Because I can pay money to the state, and the state could then put it in my local education, and they can deliver education to my population, not Wyoming's population.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So on the federal level, probably Department of Education doesn't have to be there. Localize it on either local school districts or on the state level would be better than a federal level.
That makes sense.
Now, a benefit would be if you had some kind of innovation, right, in education, and then you use the federal government to force all school districts to be able to take your innovation and apply it across the board. So if you really had a real problem where you had school district A over here was doing really well and school district B was not doing well, it's like that state government is dumb. Why are they not doing this? Then you can force the that school to come up to a certain standard. So my vote on the Department of Education, it needs to be limited to that scenario, and that's it. All right. So if it's innovation standardization, fine. Rolling out standards not on economics, but actually on the merits of education. So
Yeah, because I mean, really, what works for one school system may not work for another.
100%.
So yeah,
on a federal level, you're looking down at 4,000 school districts, and you're deciding something that needs to be rolled out for all of them. Might not work for all of them. Not even necessary.
Not really realistic.
All right. So IRS, Department of Education, FBI.
Again, don't know a whole lot about that one.
Okay, so federal law enforcement takes a jurisdiction on the federal level. You have local law enforcement, and then you have things that span multiple states. So if you have, a ring that has 7 states involved, right? It's a thing that's bigger than the states. So Ohio and Pennsylvania trying to organize between the two jurisdictions to take them down some, big meth operation.
Yeah.
You might need federal enforcement to be able to aid the local agencies, right?
Yeah. I feel like I would be big on anything that involves protection.
Now,
protecting people.
what if the the FBI were being used as political operatives to go after people that on the federal level where it was a wing of strategic, like if I was used the FBI to be able to infuse myself in a rally and cause disarray because it's good for one political party, right?
Yeah,
would that be the
obviously
misuse of a federal agency?
corruption, of course.
Okay,
You don't want that.
so then let's change the FBI so that it is only there, limit the use, so that they are to help coordinate logistics for local law enforcement. They're an assistant to local law enforcement, and then cap them off so they're not going out of the bounds and can't be used for things like politics, like espionage in corporations or whatever. Okay, CIA.
We may come back to FBI,
Okay.
but okay.
Oh no, if you have more, go for it.
I'm just. Well, maybe I need to know a little more about CIA as well,
Okay.
because maybe that's where I'm thinking. All right, CIA.
Okay. So
They're
now
very secretive things. I don't know a whole lot about it.
So now you have things that are outside the scope of national, federal things, And you have international things. You have things that are going on overseas. And gathering intelligence to be able to help law enforcement be able to enforce laws that are outside of the scope of the local level, the state level, the federal level, now the bigger one. So it's almost sitting on top of the FBI, where you're protecting the interests of the country against things that are outside the country. Seems like a good thing, right?
Yeah, security,
now, again,
I like it.
Again, there's probably a lot of abuses that happen when you have somebody who's at a level that, who's the oversight of FBI, who's the oversight of the CIA. If they're misused, who's going to put a stop to that if they're being, outside of the scope? So limited scope on CIA, limited scope on FBI. I'm not scrapping them, but I'm gutting the crap out of them because there's probably a lot of, influences that aren't connected to why they were invented in the first place.
But do you still sort of agree on having these organizations? You had said, I think my confusion comes in when you talk about using them to help local governments or local law enforcement. Say again what you had said about not using them at the federal level.
So if they're being used politically,
okay,
like they were used politically instead of being an assistant to local law enforcement. So the big one was whether or not there were FBI agents that were put in the January 6th rally, right? They were put in there in plain clothes and they were walking around and may or may not have been responsible for inciting some violence to see who would react and who would misbehave and whatnot. So if it were me and I was saying, okay, the FBI needs to be assisting a local law enforcement group in an investigation, not being part of what was happening there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you got to be careful with corruption. Are they at all involved in, for lack of a better term, who's involved in keeping an eye on federal government people to make sure they are not corrupt or they are not involved in wrongdoings?
Well, it's kind of circular because they have oversight committees that are supposed to pay attention to what happens there. In government, if you have an institution that has money and power, you will have corruption 100% guaranteed. So an oversight committee their whole goal is to be really good at sensing whether or not something's got to a point where corruption is very likely to happen, and break it down, make it smaller, and simplify it. But in government, nothing ever gets smaller; it always gets bigger. So oversight committee, it's sort of like a formality or a token gesture, and its goal is not to root it out. Its goal is to react to something once it's happened.
Okay.
But I think oversight committees are important to be able to put a check and balance on any form of government. And when something survives that scrutiny, that's when we got to pay attention as voters and say it's gone beyond the limitations of oversight or of that balance of power, and it needs to be, really minimized. Define what it is and limit its scope to what it's supposed to be doing, and don't let it go beyond that.
So just make sure there's clear definitions as to the role of every organization, and you stay in your lane.
Because once there's a divider, then people are important will let them step 1 foot over that divider, and then that becomes the new limit. And then it gets so big, you're like, oh, why does the FBI have the ability to send a SWAT team for a guy that's keeping a squirrel in his house, right? That kind of thing, like really overstepping the bounds by saying, okay, Patriot Act went beyond the scope of where we're supposed to be. We granted it because there was an emergency, but then we never retracted the boundary back to where it should have gone before, and now that just becomes the new boundary.
Isn't there a thing I've heard called SWAT something? What is it?
Swatting?
Is it swatting? Or it's a prank.
Yeah.
People call on other people, and a SWAT team comes to their house.
Yep. Breaks
as
down
a
the
prank.
door. Yep.
Holy crap.
Yeah, you say the right words and you report the right crime, and really they take it serious and they break down your doors to, bust up the crime that was reported.
Yeah. And then it's like, what do you do? Because in an actual serious situation, you'd want that to happen, but obviously you don't want it to happen when it's a prank. That's insane. People are crazy.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, that's the part of our culture is that you will have something that is a good thing, and it's only a matter of small amount of time before it's corrupted and used for something that was never intended. And that's on the good side and the bad side. So you set up a table out there with $100 bills, and you're only going to give it to people who need $100 bills. How long before people who don't need $100 bills are taking your $100 bills? That is who we are as people. So if we don't have a method for saying, okay, well, I can set the table out and be effective for 30 minutes, but then I have to take down the table and remove it because the dependency and the knowledge that it exists will let somebody take advantage of something. And that's same, like I said, same thing in government.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So FDA.
FDA, that's one I would like to see have some, I don't know if I want to say reform or if I just want to say guidelines, look at some stuff. I mean, again, I would probably need to know a little bit more about it.
All right, so you need
from a Joe side.
So we're feeding people chemicals, right? Mm-hmm. So we want someone to say whether or not those chemicals have, things that will go wrong with you, right? So it's a poison, it's a toxin, there are side effects, there needs to be testing, taking a scientific approach for sort of identifying things that are dangerous for people to consume, whether or not you're eating Cheetos or you're taking Tylenol, right? You want a regulator to be able to give you information whether or not there's any risk involved through testing, right?
Right.
Do you think it's an institution that is corruptible?
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
For sure. It is corruptible. It is, I don't know. I get leery when I hear these things like FDA regulations and I guess how much, what's the word? How much power that has behind it. Like there are a lot of things that are not FDA regulated that people use. And then there are things that are FDA regulated that maybe people shouldn't use. And I'd really love it to once again mean something when FDA is on something. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And the corruption in the FDA, it's sort of like if we had some kind of agreement. I own Joe's Plumbing Company, right? Mm-hmm. And you were responsible for making sure that everybody's drain system here was working correctly so you didn't have backups and have sewage all over the place, right? And I knew you did the permitting, and I was like, hey, Kelin, you're going to go to these companies and they're going to have a problem with their sewer. I will give you $50 if you tell them that Joe's Plumbing Service is the best plumbing service and you recommend them and even require them as being a direct partner with Kelin's permitting service. So when I give you $50, you tell them, no harm, no foul, right? You're just going to give me all the business. That's a corruption because you're not saying, go get the plumbing. You are setting a gateway between me selling more plumbing services and the permitting that you're given. So when it comes to like FDA, then on a small scale there, how many pharmaceutical companies are paying people to decide certain things? And I'm talking politicians, regulators, scientists, all the way down the road. How many of those little agreements do we have? Because it benefits me if you say I'm awesome and you make it mandatory, I'll sell more stuff. And the more stuff I sell, the more money I'm going to give back to you. Now it all works. If there's not a balance against that, it is assured part of what happens in the FDA.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that's everywhere. And not a doubt in my mind that things like that occur.
Okay, so again, taking an FDA, knowing that there's still some regulations or regulating that has to happen, and making sure that it is fair, it's uncorrupted, and we make it small in scope so that it's just doing what it needs to do. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Okay.
FAA.
That I don't know much about.
All right, so this one I'm just pissed off about because it happened recently.
Okay.
So the FAA regulates air traffic, right? Things that go into the sky, airplanes, Elon Musk and his rockets, right?
Yeah.
So the government and Elon Musk are at odds right now because he was a supporter of Trump, and the Biden administration really put him on the back burner when it came to electric cars and whatever. So they were at odds, right? And so he needs an FAA permit to launch his rockets when he goes up. So you need, if somebody's in their backyard is going to be launching rockets, you want having some oversight to make sure that they're doing it safely. Well, the FAA, if I don't like you, I can delay your permits indefinitely. I can make you wait 3 months so that you can't launch, not for any reason other than, we got a lot of paperwork to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So corruption, they're not taking it as a blind, filling out your application should be a quick turnaround time when that is your sole job and responsibility, right?
Yeah, okay.
How about adding fees and penalties depending on whether or not I like you or not, or not adding penalties if I do like you or not?
Yeah.
So the FAA has been a little heavy-handed on certain people and a little light-handed on other people. Are you seeing a theme here? You seeing a theme?
Just a tad, just a little bit. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's see what the environmental EPA. EPA, same exact thing. You got regulations. We don't want people just to be able to take your tour bus and dump your sewage off of the side of a bridge. That's bad, right? Because that goes into the rivers and might pollute someone. And then you have potable water that you dump just out in the desert that poses no harm. So one person, right, that dumps the thing gets nothing, and the other person, right, just because, again, this was Elon Musk. I'm a fanboy. I can't help it.
You're a bit of a fan.
A little bit of a fan.
Okay.
So they fined him for putting potable water somewhere in the desert where it did absolutely no harm just because they didn't like him. Okay. So again, regulators being a weapon of politics rather than knowing the scope of their job and keeping a really, really limited thing, understanding that corruption is going to be in there and having a balance for when corruption happens, how to root it out.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I don't necessarily think I have a least favorite. IRS is probably the biggest one. The biggest one.
I was going to say, is there anyone who really loves the IRS?
And not necessarily because of tax collection. Not because of tax collection. Mm-hmm. Because it was weaponized is the one big thing where the federal government was able to audit people they disagreed with, and they used it as a weapon. If you ever draw that weapon, you lose that ability to use it, because then you have regular people who will, just be terrified of a government weapon. If you're going to control me, if I speak up against you and I get an audit, right? How many people are you able to hold in check just by threatening the use of a federal agency?
Yeah. So they're almost, I guess, would you say then a little too powerful?
100%. What's the oversight? Like, what happens to them if they misuse their power? A cop draws his gun and he's not supposed to. There's a power where they can be held responsible for that.
Yeah.
So when the IRS went after, I think it was some kind of nonprofit and audited them, or denied a nonprofit based on supporting Trump in 2016, who made the news for being penalized for misusing their power? Nobody. You don't even know the name. Don't even know who did it. Not even an I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're kind of like, oh, well, whatever. Next. And it's like, wait. You just screwed with my life.
Ruined you. Like, people are destroyed by government agencies that use their regulations to penalize people they disagree with. And the minute that you do that's really the only thing. You have to have almost like the Hippocratic Oath with government agencies that if they ever abuse their power, they are done.
Yeah.
Like, it has to be so serious that no one would ever go over that boundary and use it against someone.
These agencies don't take any kind of oath like that?
If they do, they're not serious about it, because you never, ever hear about someone going down for the count.
I feel like that would be something they should do if they don't 100%. Already do.
Yeah.
You have to Google it.
And most of these places, most of these agencies, I say gut them and get rid of them, but what I really mean is dissolve them in their current form so that you don't inherit some of the cancers that come along with them. Mm-hmm. If you're going to reinvent them after they're gone, like a Department of Education, you take it away, right? And then what's screaming for help and need, and then just fill out the things that are actually necessary as part of that department's duties, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think, because you get in that deal where if you have 100,000 employees as part of the Department of Education, how do you not target, right, an individual? Yeah. It's almost better just to gut it and then build it back after you've ripped it out. Yeah,
I mean, really, and like what you said, not like anyone saying, oh, we don't need this at all and let's totally get rid of this. But I do like the idea of saying, let's look at it. Let's see what's necessary, what's not necessary, what's more harmful than good, and why keep things that aren't working. They're costing money, but they're not working, or they're being harmful to somebody or some organization. Why not look at it again? Oh, because that would make you look like a traitor or like you're just supporting a jerk or what. There's always some dumb excuse when it's like, but this isn't a bad thing. It makes sense. Why would you continue to let things just be if they're not working and costing money?
Yeah. Twitter's a great example of that. Elon Musk buys Twitter. He fires 80% of the people that are on the Twitter staff, and the page works just fine, minus 80% of the staff that were there. So reasonable people are looking at it saying, what were those people doing before the firing? They obviously weren't critical of the operations of Twitter, so they were expendable. And so they were a company that was hemorrhaging money, had employees they didn't need, and he came in and said, there's some lack of efficiencies here. So he gutted 80% of the people who weren't really playing a role that was necessary, and it still tended to operate. So if I went into federal government, I'm Elon Musk, and I'm looking at the Department of Education, and I'm like, my goal here is to get rid of 80% of you, right? Take the people who aren't absolutely necessary and gut them out. The 20% that are there, instant shrinkage in the footprint of that department, and now you've got a starting point.
Yeah. And saving money.
He says $2 trillion a year is what he could save.
That's what I heard.
And I believe it's probably greater than that.
So somebody on maybe the other side that wants to disagree or that does disagree, what would you see their argument being? If you had to be devil's advocate, if you had to say...
So the federal government just balloons up because it hires a lot of these people, right? And so these are federal jobs. These are good paying federal jobs that people have. It might be in a position where they don't do much or aren't really necessary, but they're still a job. So if I, as a president, if I wanted to have good job numbers, make 50% of the population have a government job and you nailed it, right? And so they would say, if I lay off 80% and there's, 10 million government jobs, you're instantly going to fire, 8 million, 7.5 million people, right? Instantly. Well, you're losing jobs there.
Yeah, that's going to look at it as, oh, this president lost all these jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would say you're having an immense amount of talent that are being harbored within government, okay, that would be more useful on the outside of government and private industry. Think about how much innovation is not happening because you have really smart people working a desk job, doing absolutely nothing, contributing actually nothing, collecting a big paycheck, where a company that could actually use their expertise and build products and put services out there. Because remember, government doesn't have to do anything to justify their paycheck. Private industry has to actually do stuff and be successful and whatever. So I think if you hemorrhage those people back out in the private sector, that companies won't have this, I can't find anybody to hire thing. You're directly competing against small business and private enterprise when you harbor all of that talent within the federal government.
So you're not even so much just saying, take all these people, get rid of them. They're gone. It's more, take these people and put them to a different use.
Heck yeah. Move them out to the private sector where they could actually be accountable and use their skills to change things. Like we're being starved by good people out there because the federal government's just like blobbing them and sucking them into the government apparatus, where if you ask them, I'd love to have a poll, go amongst government employees, ones that have maybe been in the private sector, and ask them the pros and cons. Like, are you effective? Are you able to do things? Are you just follow the 3 tasks on your list and pick a big paycheck, right? It's probably an easy gig, right? But it's probably not a very fulfilling job.
I like that. We're
solving the world's problems.
We are! When are you starting your campaign, Joe?
Well, hopefully the super team that just went is going to Washington in January. We'll do half the things that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Everything we're talking about is going to have metaphoric guns fixed on them to make them not do this. And I'm thinking pharmaceuticals probably, I would only start with pharmaceuticals and the FDA because I think that's going to be my biggest adversary when I do this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like there's going to be such a stigma on that because people will hear ideas like going after corruption when it comes to drugs or pharmaceutical industry, things of that nature. And all of a sudden, you then get labeled anti-vax, anti-science. These drugs help people, and you just refuse to see that. And people want to twist it into something it's not.
Right.
Instead of seeing the potential as to what these changes can do and what being a healthier country in general can do. And even just like down to an individual and their health improving naturally and how that can change their life. You're the bad guy if you even pitch that idea.
Well, it comes back to the beginning of this. So we have an election where we proved out that we have differing opinions and we can't get along. We can't compromise. We can't talk about it. We hate each other and whatever. Well, the real intelligent stuff happens when you get two people that are opposing views that are super bright and intelligent, and they can talk to one another and come to some kind of compromise. So, for instance, you have both Ben Carson, who's going to be involved in this, and you have RFK Jr., who's involved in this. RFK Jr. thinks that fluoride is a poison byproduct that they're putting in the water and it doesn't need to be. You have Ben Carson, who thinks there are some benefits to it. It might be poison, but the benefits might outrisk the poison. You get these two very intelligent people who I respect in the room, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to hammer out a compromise that is the best for the American people. And we may not get a full-blown fluoride out of the water thing, and we might not get nothing, status quo, nothing changes. But when those two people get in a room, I trust that something's going to happen and it's going to be better than where we're at right now. But if the rest of the world is intolerant to having any ideas challenged and everything is just dogma, right? Then you have the public that we're dealing with, right? The evidence is right there that the public, once they elect somebody to do something, they need to butt out and stay out of it and let the smart people do their job. So first step is to put smart people in powers of position. And then number two, don't sit there and second guess and think you know more than the neuroscientist or neurosurgeon and the, what was he, environmental attorney or environmental lawyer or something like that. So let smart people do what they do. And then don't nitpick and try to put them on blast because they're not doing what you would do. You put them there because of their expertise.
Yep. Something you said too, this might even be going off on a different tangent, but the whole being able to have two sides that have a conversation and that will sit down and work something out until something is worked
exactly.
out. I cannot stand this whole culture of unfriend me if you don't agree. I'm going to get up and walk out if you don't agree.
Right.
If you post something I don't like, I'm going to block you. If you say something I don't like, we're not friends anymore. It's so childish and so ridiculous, because if everybody agreed and everybody was for one idea, nothing would get done. Nothing would work out. Everything would fail. You have to have opposing views to see where your weaknesses are and to see where you need to strengthen an area or to just point out something you don't see because you have a certain type of mind.
But we don't have that ability. You are asking for a utopia that no matter what, if you don't like Trump, the first misstep that he has, if he's trying to solve a problem, you're going to gun him down and he's going to be done before it even goes anywhere, right? Same thing happens on every expert that we put in there. So politics becomes who can make the safest play without the scrutiny of other people. And that's where the corruption begins. So there's an incentive to be corrupt because you are making the safe play. If I'm Elon Musk and I take a risk, right, the benefit is that it might be successful and I might have some kind of innovation. The risk is that I'm unsuccessful and I just get buried under the failure of the popular view on what I did. Nothing would ever happen. That's what government becomes. Everybody taking zero risks, cordoning out the most things that make themselves prosper, and, again, playing it safe.
Yep. I mean, I have mixed feelings on this election too, and I get mixed feelings when I see things go all one way. If it's a red wave or if everyone goes blue or whatever. That's really the only time I get a little I would like a little pushback in there. And I know there's the argument that then it'll hinder things from getting done and they'll constantly be fighting and somebody can't get anything done. And to an extent, yes, I see that. But I'm one of those voters where it's like, I want a little of this side and a little of this side and this side and a little of this side. Good luck, because you have to sort of have that. Like I said, the pushback, the people that can make you see things you don't see, but in a way that you cannot storm out and say, screw you all, you don't have the same views as me, and now I hate you. And the name calling and the you're this and you're that if you don't see things my way. That, I think, was just running this whole election, is that mindset.
All right, so let me take some wisdom and impart it on our system. Okay. I call it the pendulum swing. And so, like, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So think of, like, whatever you do, the opposite reaction is going to come back at you, right? Okay. And so if you, going into it, know that if I throw a paper wad at you, right? If I throw it, then I know that I might get a paper wad back at me, right? And I have to contemplate before I throw the paper wad that I have to be cool with the paper wad coming back at me. So if you do a red wave and it's all Republican and you just go and do all kind of Republican things, right? What happens? Well, you create energy on the blue wave, and anything that you played at the blue people is going to come back at you in equal proportions, if not more, right? So, what keeps countries from hitting nuclear war is that if I launch my nuclear missile at you, I know you are going to launch your nuclear missile at me. So that restrains me from making an irrational decision to launch my nuclear. I will try another way so that I don't have to use my nuclear because I don't want you launching yours at me, right?
Yeah.
And where was I going with that?
The discomfort of all one direction.
So if you know the pendulum swing, if you're going to take advantage of a power that you have and you're going to take it to the fullest extent of that power, you know you're just advancing or inviting the opposite to happen. You got to picture one good example is, do you remember Harry Reid? I believe this was a dude. I
don't know.
Anyway, let me use a better example. So a filibuster. You know what a filibuster is? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sort of.
Okay. So let's just say you have the minority in Congress, right? And the other side is going to pass something and you do not have the ability to stop it. Okay. So the minority is allowed to get up at the podium and read War and Peace for as long as they absolutely want. And they stall the whole operation so that the thing that you're doing, they don't want to happen so bad, they're willing to sit there for 6 months and read War and Peace on the podium as an obstacle to getting that thing done. Okay? So you don't want to do that, but if that's the nuclear option that you have, you're going to do it. So, but the Senate at a certain point was like, well, these Republicans, they keep getting in our way of doing something. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to get rid of the filibuster, right? And then a couple years later, they really wish they had that filibuster because now it was the other side and they got rid of the only tool that stopped the majority party from getting something done. But it didn't occur to them when they got rid of it that, hey, in the future, what if we're ever in the minority? And that filibuster thing would be really useful when they cram something down on us and we really don't want to have it. And that was like there was never a light bulb of realization that what they were doing was they were doing to themselves sometime in the future. And I love when those things play out because it's almost like the 5-year-old that finally gets a sense of justice that they didn't realize at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, next time I won't do that shit. But collectively, we never come to that realization that that's going to be due back at us.
Yeah. And I just keep saying, I'm like, this is their chance. This is the one side's chance to just show us that things are going to get better. Show us that we will have improvement, that people will be happier, that we will thrive. Because if not, 4 more years, we're doing this all again.
And we will. We will be doing it. I guaranteed because nothing's going to stop that pendulum. There's no side that's going to be like, okay, we're in full power and we're going to negotiate the non-use of our power and befriend the other side and say, we're doing this on purpose and this is an olive branch to you. And we have full faith and trust that when you're in power, you'll be as respectful as I. We are not that people.
Yeah.
So all it's going to be is the pendulum swings until they get so out of whack and absurd that the whole system gets crushed. That's the only thing that I can guarantee will happen. It'll get so wild that we won't be able to control it anymore. So here's a question for you.
Okay.
Do you think Trump won or Kamala lost?
That's a good question. Oh, that is interesting. I almost answered that as a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, give me your instinct first, and then we'll think through it.
All right. first reaction was Kamala lost.
Okay. Back it.
I don't feel that they had a good candidate in Kamala Harris. I think a lot of what she ran on was pure emotions. I think it was bad guy versus good guy. I think it was, just making people feel warm and fuzzy versus the big bully that you should hate. I didn't see a lot from her in general, let alone anything of substance. I don't feel like she could hold her own. There were so many things that I was just like, why would they, of all the people, like, why her? This just isn't a good, to me, it just felt like, well, she was the vice president and it would make us look bad if we didn't go with her and pick somebody else. So we kind of have to go with her. It felt very forced. It felt very, just not a right fit. And so to go up against somebody like Donald Trump that, one, has had the experience of being the president before, has the diehard followers that he has the loud personality that he has, and then, of course, you've got J.D. Vance that I think is also just very unafraid to put himself out there and talk to anybody and as often as possible. It was just these two polar opposites that I don't know why they thought, other than making an emotional appeal to people, she had a chance of being a good president. And I still think there's even a lot of people that maybe don't like Trump and his personality. They don't like the way he is, the way he speaks. Maybe they think he's arrogant. Maybe they think he's whatever. And when you have this other side saying, oh, yeah, and they want to say it's about policy. In my opinion, because it is. Because there are still people, I think, that maybe can't stand the guy. But when you're looking at policy, it's like, okay, well, I see his point, and where's hers? It just very much was like, had there been someone maybe like a Tulsi Gabbard that was the Democratic candidate, I think this would have been looked at differently.
I got a different theory on this.
Okay.
All right, so I think that they noticed Joe was deteriorating way before. Okay.
Yeah.
And they sort of have long game people picked out for who they're going to run in the future, and they start like really, forming them way in advance. And I think when Joe got to the point where they felt like he might be unelectable, they're not going to be able to pull him through this one. They were at a point where they were like, I don't want to waste my 2028 candidate right now. There's not enough time. Whoever we put in this position does not have a real good chance. So they sorted through all the available names, and they picked an option that if this one lost, that's no big deal. But there's some elements of that person that gives them a sporting chance that they might squeak one out and get them to their 2028 candidate. I believe Kamala was the sacrificial lamb of this deal. It was a bad option for the Democrats because they did not want to waste their good candidate with so little time left. And they thought, let's give it a run. Worst case. So
would you say she lost over he won?
Being that she was a sacrificial lamb, I think she was put in there because they knew she was going to lose. So I think it was predetermined that she was not their winner.
I mean, this whole election campaign, every time. And I really try to give both sides equal attention. I really try to look into both sides. I don't want to be swayed by other opinions. And I'm just like, what are they doing? Why this is your best option?
Yeah, she would never survive a primary. She didn't survive a primary, but she would never survive a full long-term campaign. Right?
Yeah.
The only way that she halfway squeaks in there, if you give her a short window, she can get in front of the teleprompter and be choreographed as the Mets and, like I said, squeak her in. But she's not a candidate that would have been able to run something full.
No, they want someone that they think can be likable enough to play the emotional card.
Yeah.
This is somebody that you're going to like and want to support. Of course, it would be great to say we've had our first female president or, maybe a woman of color or all these different cards that they had to play that was based on pure emotion.
That's how they thought they were going to squeak it out,
Yes.
was that play. So if you look at all the whole board of everybody to choose from, and you have a couple of people that would have been a better candidate, but you don't want to waste them when there's only a 3-month campaign, then you get to a certain level and say, okay, best odds, best chances here. I can put this person in, and they're going to be ruined. Like, give you like a 4% chance of getting elected. So who are we okay with ruining, right? But still has enough in them that they might squeak in there. She was it.
Yeah, I agree. To me, the fact that this race was so close, it speaks more about, I think, the people in our country than the candidates and how good of a job they do. Because I don't see them being equals at all. And even, when we talked about the winners versus talking about, the people on the losing end of this, just everything I'm seeing, and again, it's just on my side and maybe the people that I know on social media, it's still just very emotional. It's still very, you're a bad person if you did not vote for Kamala. You're a bad person if you did not vote this way. You're racist. You support criminals. You do this, you do that. And it's just like, can you give me an example of something that would have benefited the American people in, I don't know, their everyday lives or something? Like, can you give me something with a little more substance other than name calling?
Well, we involved all the normies into politics. Like, these normies shouldn't be paying attention to something sophisticated like politics. They should be watching Survivor and, drinking on the couch, right? That's the amount of emotional drama that they need to be fulfilled, and keep them out of, like, the adult table, right?
And they will say that same thing, that the other side doesn't know what they're talking about. They're uneducated. They're this and that. And it's like, I even saw last night, I think NBC was on, and they were saying, oh yeah, a lot of this election's coming down to women. It was in particular college educated women that have come out and all this stuff. And their point being, these college-educated women were pro-Harris. And I'm just like, I know a lot of college-educated women that are not. And it was just so one-sided and manipulative and biased. And it was just, and they will say the same thing, that you don't know what you're talking about, and you're uneducated, and you should have learned all these things.
That is the absolute game, for sure.
And they're like, oh, I can't wait for you all to see what you've done. Okay.
In a perfect world, you would have no polished people in politics. If you want to get something done, it would be a bunch of technical, logical people who are just solving problems. Like, they're getting in their spreadsheets and they're solving problems. They wouldn't be able to speak very well. They wouldn't be able to get in front of the microphone. Terrible communicators, right? But the reason when you get polished ones, it's almost like if you paid an actor to do your thing, they don't really feel about the thing. They read the script. That's what you get with politicians. They're empty suits who are just willing to read the script and play the part and go through the motions. The powerful people are the ones that control the puppets that are wearing the suit.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's what we become, a bunch of normies that have emotional responses to actors who are reading scripts into microphones, and the real smart people are nowhere to be found in the landscape of things.
God, there's just, and that's again why I say I think a lot of this, I think Trump had the amount of support he did, not just because of people that think, maybe he knows what he's talking about as far as the economy and keeping the country safe and all of that. But I think so many people backed him because they were so sick of the rhetoric of the other side. And whether people want to believe that to be a good reason to vote for someone or not, I think a lot of it was. I think one side made it all about emotions, and it backfired. Like, you sure did. You pissed off a lot of people by throwing out all this negativity that you call hate speech that you used against them. And it was just, I think so many people just saw this as an opportunity to be like, I'm done. I'm done with this crap. I'm done with getting labeled as certain things. And
good. I hope they all bow out. I hope they all start paying attention to something else. Leave it to the adult table to fix problems and sort things out. All right, so for the next 4 years, all right, give me your prediction about the state of things? Do you think good, bad, up, thumbs down?
I guess the optimist in me thinks we will see some good.
Okay.
I do. I think we will see some good out of this in at least a couple of the areas. In all of them, maybe not. A couple of them, I believe so. I also feel like a lot probably won't change. I'm hoping I see good. I'm hoping. I don't really know. I'm hoping I do. I'm expecting to. At least in my opinion, I think you're going to have those people that what I call is improvement or good things. They're going to, shoot holes in and tell you why you're wrong for thinking that. But I don't see things getting worse, I guess I could say.
All right. I'm gonna break my own rules of this question. Okay. I'm gonna give you my prediction.
Okay.
I think this is the long game play. Okay.
Okay.
So I think. All right. So Trump is one term. He's out of there. He's not looking for re-election. So whatever he can get done in these 4 years is going to get done.
Yep.
I think all of the things he's attacking are going to take much longer than 4 years to be able to get done. There's no way.
That's kind of why I'm like, I don't know if it'll be hugely different.
So JD, young guy, picked very specifically for the person that's going to hand the baton. So I think in 2028, it's going to be Gavin Newsom versus JD Vance. JD Vance is going to take the baton. Everything they start right now, they need to have lots and lots of successes early on. So the public wants the continuation. He's going to have a successor, so he needs to hand off what happens to that next person. So I think they're going to orient it so that everybody's going to be enamored. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. With what gets done, they're not going to start off with the most radioactive things. They're not going to start off with the good things that are going to make people mad. They're going to take the things that everybody can kind of agree that that's a change that was needed. Everybody feels the effects. If the economy gets better, illegal immigration goes down, whatever the top 3 things are, those are the things that they're going to hit first. So everybody can kind of say, yeah, things are much better here. And then you have another 8 years with JD Vance. I think this is going to be a 12-year cycle where whatever they set out now, I think 12 years is probably enough time to get these very heavy lifts that they have planned done if they can get 3 consecutive Republican terms to be able to do it. It's going to have to be lots of negotiation. There's going to be lots of Senates and Houses that have to span this. So you can't get to 4 or 2 years from now, the House changes and the Senate changes, and now nothing can get done because of that changeover. So if they're really good at negotiating and if they're really playing a long game, the onset of this is going to have lots of unity within government, so they're making concessions from day one. If they come out guns blazing and force everything down people's throat from the get-go, the 12-year plan is done, and they're going to get a 4 years with as much as they can, and it's going to be good but not great.
Yeah. And I keep hearing that thing, too, like, you always hear that argument, well, if so-and-so would have done things, they would have done them when they had the chance. But then you hear, well, it takes time to do things. We didn't have a lot of time to do it. So which side of that argument do you tend to lean towards?
Well, politicians are bullshit artists, okay? So it's one of those... It's one of those things where their first job is to get reelected.
Yeah.
Right? So if they have to do something 30 seconds before getting reelected. So like I effed around for 3 years and then... people are really concerned about the border. So at the last minute, you do something for the border. Mm-hmm. They only do things as inspired by getting elected the next time, right?
Yeah.
And so I have 0%. Like, I think that you probably jacked around for 3 years and didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden it became a priority. I don't see anybody other than the Dream Team, right, taking a sole principled responsibility of doing it for the sole reason of doing it, not because they want to get elected as a professional politician for the next 20 years.
Speaking of the Dream Team or the Avengers, maybe I've just missed this. I don't know. Do we have some like next steps for Tulsi Gabbard? I mean, she kind of came over, helped campaign, helped support, helped push along. Is there anything that maybe they're talking about doing with her? Like RFK, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about what he's going to do. I wonder very much what the next steps for Tulsi are.
I really think it's in her cabinet. She is so wicked smart, and she is really good at the political game. So I don't necessarily think she's going to be one of those actuators in those department, sort of like reorganizations. I think she's going to be a right hand in some department making all that, because she is just so functionally good at what she does. She was an executive, in the executive branch as a governor. So military. I mean, she is awesome. So that's where I would use her if she came into my cabinet. She'd be right hand.
That would be so great. It would be so great to see. And then I'm so sick of hearing these things like when they take someone that got different information and change their mind, but then they say, oh, well, they just jumped ship and they abandoned, or they were outed, pushed out of their party or whatever. Like, what do you say if someone's like, oh, RFK had to go that way because his own party kicked him out? Or like, oh, people turn. That drives me insane. You could say that about both sides. People went to both sides based off of who was going to benefit them.
That's politics. And really, if you take a freshman, representative, right? Got no seats, got no power. You're beholden to everybody. You would just be happy if anybody gave you something, something to do. So to be able to have a presence, you almost have to play the game and become a politician so that you get in a position where you can actually do anything.
Yeah.
Right? And then so a lot of them, for relevancy, play the political game. So I'm not surprised if it came down to it. Let's just say some of these independents really impress me. When they have a principle and their party throws them out and they stick to principle and then they run as an independent and then they get vote. Like Bernie Sanders is one of those. What was the guy from West Virginia that recently ran as an independent? I forget his name. But anyway, those guys are they take all of their power and they're willing to risk it and lose it to be able to follow through on what they believe in and their principles. Not many politicians are in that boat. So it's a very specific type of politician who would forgo the cocktail parties and the admiration from the rest of the people in their party to do the principle thing. And I think that's a very small subset.
You know who else I've just recently, and I know this is incredibly late in the game, just recently started to find interesting. Oh, I don't know how to say his name. I feel like it begins with a V.
Vivek.
Yes.
Ramaswamy. Yeah, Vivek.
That guy.
Yeah.
Started watching some more stuff about him just this week. And that is one of the most perfect examples that I have seen of someone trying to have an adult conversation with somebody else that has an opposing view. And it is, let's really hash this out. Let's really consider each other's viewpoint. Let's really give each other time to speak. And almost every time I see him do that, the other person just wants to storm off and just quit. And there was one, I did see them come back and they sort of found some middle ground. But I like that guy. How do you feel about that guy?
Oh, I love him. He's great.
I think he's part of one of the Avengers that I've seen
one of the young
him.
dudes that are in there that has a long shelf life in politics. But I consider him, usually when you have a debate, it's like, I want to throw my zinger at you, you want to throw yours. And you weren't really interested in my response. You were looking to own me, right? And so like when he's got the brain power and his ability that he does, and he goes up against someone that it's just a battle of debates where he's not going to change any minds, he's not going to function. It's such wasted brain energy. I want that guy solving problems. I don't want him debating some numbless normie, brainless normie and wasting that energy and attention on them. So that's like even, like Ben Carson. The guy, they're so patient and they explain themselves. And when they explain themselves, you see deer in headlights with that person because it never even penetrated their skull. They read something earlier in the day, they threw it out at you, thought they were going to make you uncomfortable, and that was it for them. That's all they wanted to do to you, is they wanted to injure you with their words for a minute. They weren't there about to get in some kind of two-way exchange.
Yeah. And I don't know. I hope if anything comes out of this election, at least for a couple of maybe...
seconds?
Well, yeah, but a couple of maybe like open-minded people, it is to now learn to consider other viewpoints and other ideas. And I've tried to remain neutral through a lot of this election, but, it's towards the end now. I don't care. I'll admit it. But I used to be I used to be pretty, Democratic, left. I've never in my life voted for a Republican president, ever. I feel like I still support a lot of the ideals and thoughts that people who lean left support. But I really got more information this time and a different view this time. And I started listening to those people that I would have just automatically written off. Well, they're just part of that machine, and it's nothing but bullcrap over there anyways. And I only like these people. And then you start seeing these people go a little off the rails, and these people start to make a little more sense and truly look at sources of information that are not biased. And everybody says that, but I don't think everybody actually does it. And really start listening to each other. You know, I said earlier, you have these people that are like, well, if you feel this way, then don't talk to me. We're not friends. That's the worst thing you can do. If you feel this way and I don't, you're the one I need to talk to. Why would I just sit in cahoots all day with all the like-minded people that get it? It's like, I want to know why you don't. Tell me your experiences. Show me your sources. Tell me the instances that you have seen all these wrongdoings and let me see. And if you don't have that, then don't be mad if I go the other direction.
But you project a bunch. You are such a reasonable, nice person. And when you're talking to someone, you think they're also a nice, reasonable person.
Oh, I have found they
are not.
Are not. Yes.
Okay, let's just say we can agree. We have the ideals. Like, today, I'm just going to be nice to everybody. It's easy to do when it's reciprocated and there's no friction because of it. Now, what if you came up and you were nice to me and I said, that's nice of you, but you're a jerk face. And then you said, we're nice to me again. And I said, and you're Hitler. And then you said something nice to me and I kneecapped you. And then you were nice to me and I slashed your tires. How long would you go about when the principles of other people do not support you being nice to me? How long do you stay nice? That 1 second, right? When you know you're not getting the feedback that you were after, you thought, if I'm going to be nice to you, I'm going to be nice to you, you're going to be nice back. And then we'll both be happy and we'll both get along, right?
Yeah.
But nobody, when the culture sucks, then you're at a disadvantage because you were nice and all you did was get kneecapped. Yeah. And it ruins you forever.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few instances where I said very respectfully, that opinion seems a little off. I don't understand why you would feel that way. Could you explain that a little more? And if you take their answer and in any way say, okay, but don't you then see how that is a little hypocritical, or wouldn't you then want to do this? Amped up, we're done here. And almost every time it's like, well, then you just don't understand, or you're just a jerk, or you're just
You notice
whatever.
They went zero introspective. They didn't go inside and consider what you just said and see if they were wrong, because that's everything you would do as a reasonable person. But it's almost like it went into the cavity that's supposed to happen, and it got vomited out with vile rage, right?
Yeah,
and that's it. So you got to just assume at a certain point that not everybody carries around the level of reasonable niceness that you have. So wasting that effort on trying to like cram a little niceness in there when it's just going to be vomited back out you, it's fool's errand. It really is.
It's funny when you were saying, you were talking about trying to be nice, not getting nice back. There's a meme I just saw on Facebook and it said, interesting point, but your mama.
100%. That is it.
Exactly.
We laugh at it because we know that 99% of the people that we're arguing with will not take anything that we said and file it in the way of useful information at all. So it's wasted.
Something I just want to scream to the country right now, and I've tried to stay out of it, and I've tried to stay neutral because it can be scary to tell people what side you're on or who you voted for. But there are a lot of people I know that supported Trump through this, that are not racist, that are not anti-LGBTQ, that are not, against women and think that women should just be controlled by men. And all these other narratives you hear are so far from the truth. And the fact that that crap gets pushed on them on a regular basis, I think, is what this whole election was about and decided its fate.
This might turn into a discussion for another show, but let me throw this out there.
Okay.
And we bring this up a lot, and this is another good example, the predicate, right?
Okay.
And so I'll give you a different example, and then we'll come back to remind me that we were talking about the racist, homophobic, Nazi thing.
Yes,
Remind me that we're there.
Okay.
All right, so the predicate is basically when you take an ideal, right, and you don't necessarily go through the science on it, make sure it's truth and whatever, but then you kind of build another idea on top of the predicate idea. So like in the 1920s, there was a journal that was written in medicine about the length of arteries that were in the body. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think they said that if you took all the capillaries and arteries in the body, you could wrap it around the earth twice. So that's this 60,000 kilometers worth of arteries in the human body.
Dang.
And the guy wrote it and he said it and he put it in a journal. And then over the years, people just keep referencing this arterial thing, this length of the arteries. And so you get to today and people are still referencing this example from all the way back when it was written. I think it was the 20s or 30s, something like that. And then somebody pointed up and said, how do we know that? Right? What's the...
Have you ever wrapped it around the earth? Yeah.
And so somebody went down the rabbit hole and they said, where does that estimation come from? And they kept digging backwards and backwards. And they went to science before it was, mature. And a guy made a guesstimate, right? Wasn't scientific. He didn't measure. He didn't take all of it and take the mass and whatever. Make a guess, right? Mm-hmm. And today's science was referencing something that was never sorted out in the interim. But think of how much science, like if let's just say we're making some kind of, volume estimate, and we wanted to say how much blood could all of the veins and arteries in the body, and you take this estimate of 60,000 kilometers and make your estimates based on the volume that can carry on a flawed origin piece of information. Right? So that's the setup for how much predicate information that we build into our beliefs here. So that if I can say Trump is a Nazi, right? And we didn't really have the conversation. I just threw it out there as an insult so that you could be like, I don't really think he's a Nazi, but okay, I'm not going to fight with you about it. But then you get 2 months in the future, and now because you didn't argue it, we didn't sort it out, we didn't go through the science, and somebody didn't sound and say, okay, you made that accusation. Let's put what a Nazi is, what the definitions. Let's see if he matches the definition. Let's come to the agreement at the end of it. Is he a Nazi? Yes or no? And if it's yes, then you can continue to call him a Nazi. And if it's no, stop calling him a Nazi because we just want accuracy in our origin predicates.
Yeah.
Now, if we go a year in the future and I'm able to say Nazi and everybody kind of just nods their head like, oh, yeah, he's a Nazi. Nobody fought it when I said it the first time, so he must be a Nazi. Now, if you are a Trump supporter, you voted for Trump, guess what? You're a Nazi too. Why? Because it worked on the origin predicate thread. By the time I got to you, you're just a Nazi too.
Oh, yeah. They did that with RFK. And they called him an anti-vaxxer. And they did it enough that now RFK is anti-vax and anti-drugs and anti-meds and anti-this and that. And if anybody sees, you know how many times I posted something supporting RFK? And I get called everything from a Trumpster and all these other things. And it's like, because you heard something that you believe to be true about somebody else, and then I reference somebody else. Now I'm all those things.
Yeah. Nobody pushes back on the predicate, and so it's used. And once it's successful, why would you not use it? It's effective. And they will not stop using it until the benefits of using it are destroyed. So if I called you Hitler and nobody said anything, I'm going to use Hitler until Hitler means nothing. And now when I really need to use Hitler, Hitler doesn't even work. So I destroyed Hitler and I just got to come up with a new Hitler word.
Yep. And
that's the cycle.
That's exactly what I see when I'm seeing all these angry people on Facebook that are doing nothing but saying, all these people that voted a certain way are now this, they're racist, they're homophobic, they are against women. I saw somebody posted something that said, and I don't think you can say this word on YouTube, but they can block it out. The only thing America hates more than a rapist is a woman. And I'm like, your argument is done with me. That's the most absurd. You say the most absurd things because you don't agree with someone. You don't ask them why they have a different view. You don't ask them what their experiences are. You don't ask them why they feel one way over the other. You name call and you You take it to the level that is so amped that you have just discredited your own argument.
To a reasonable person. To other amped people who have no brain cells, they're like, slay queen, you got him. Like, ooh.
God, I hate this country. They're all jerks. God. Yep.
Moral of the story, go watch Survivor if you're a normie.